can pick and choose the harder, the hardest, and then the bloody hard, which is the Cape Epic this year.
Hoping to become an Epic legend today. That'll be 3 of the Epic Series events in a 12-month period. Started mountain biking last March. A friend told me about the Croatia Epic, so we entered last minute. And then we kind of got the bug, so we did Swiss Epic. And then we agreed for our 40th, we'll do the Cape Epic. And it has been a challenge. We're here by the skin of our teeth, really, because mentally and physically we've been taken to the edge. But we're really hoping to finish in Val d'Orly today and get that Epic Legend medal.
If I can bring this to be a good one, my dream is complete.
Chris and I decided when we turned 30 that we should do something big for when we turn 40. And so, naturally, we picked the Cape Epic.
No race comes close to what this is. It's indescribable, amazing.
It's taken us too long to get here. 3 years ago we were here for this race and it got cancelled for COVID and we're back for it now, so yeah, we just want to finish it, and it's just been grueling the last 7 days, but we've loved every minute.
This is epic, and we're about to become legends.
Made it, we are legend. 25 years we bike together, so it's a
emotional thing.
And we just become Epic legend!
Well, that was just over 24 hours ago, and I have still got goosebumps. And if you're wondering why I have opened Dan Really Likes Wine this week with a clip of some people on mountain bikes, that's because if you missed our live shows or social media last week, I was down on the Absa Cape Epic doing the events in the evening, hosting the prize givings and the jersey presentations and the sponsor event. But during the day, I was out on the route with my camera crew, and by camera crew, I mean a small Portuguese guy called Ronaldo, as we visited winemakers who are custodians of so many of the estates through which the Epic moves. And there is and I was going to say a wonderful synergy, a very pronounced synergy to this year's Epic and to winemaking in South Africa over this harvest, because just as the riders had one hell of a challenge in 2023 with the rain bucketing down, particularly on day 5 and then on day 6, where riding was a battle through mud and water and an attritional challenge throughout. So our winemakers, especially those who by nature of the grapes they are looking to harvest, have had to deal with that rain and the impact it's had on their grapes. They've had a pretty tough time of it as well. So I have 3 guests on the show this evening who are all directly linked to the Epic. 2 of them hosted very important parts of the Epic, and the 3rd, the official wine of the Absa Cape Epic. And so we'll be finding out a little bit about their relationship with the race, but also how the harvest has gone in the context of a really tough bicycle race. Would they rather have been on the saddle through all that mud and rain, or trying to get the best out of their grapes during a very wet end to the South African Harvest 2023? Some great wine to try, and in fact, I've got some of that wine with me. What am I drinking? Well, this is wine I'm drinking from Saturday, and this is from, let me get in there nice and close, this is from Christo at Lourensford. This is one of the rare single vineyards that he does, and the reason I've got a glass of this, partly because I opened it last night, and very unusually a bottle survived through the night of the Nicholl household, and so it's opened up gloriously. But also because this was the estate that I sat huddled in on Saturday, looking out a window at the driving rain, seeking solace and warmth in a glass of world-class Cabernet Sauvignon and being enormously happy that I hadn't been daft enough to think that getting on a bicycle for the Absa Cape Epic was anything like a good idea. Many did, though. Many finished. My dear friend David Higgs amongst them. So if you're watching this as an epic finisher, congratulations and well done. Getting through this one is as good as any. If you didn't make it through, well, you've got absolutely nothing to be worried about there, because that was such a demanding week and it asked so much of so many people. How much did it ask of the winemakers, the wine estates, the routes through their estates? We'll find out in just a moment. Before we do that, though, here's a quick update on some wine news. Well, this is an interesting one because Four Cousins, for pretty much as long as I can remember, has been a mainstay of South African wine. It's been a hugely successful brand from the Retiefs out at Van Leeuwen in Robertson, but it's generally been a fairly entry-level brand. It's been a very accessible brand. It's wine made on a considerable scale that is able to be purchased at a very, very reasonable price and always delivering a fair dose of quality at that price. And so now we see it in a slightly different space. This is the very first reserve wine from Four Cousins. They've released a Merlot that they've picked from some of the best blocks in Robertson, 2021, so coming out 2 years after it has been produced. Now, it's not super premium price-wise. This is 120 rand a bottle, or at least that's the recommended price, but that's certainly more than you'd normally pay for a bottle of Four Cousins as we know it. So it's an interesting strategic move. Is it one that will prove successful? Well, knowing the Four Cousins team and the marketing muscle and the effort they put behind it, I suspect the answer is probably yes. I haven't had a chance to taste it yet. We'll look to get some on the show and have a sample of it to see what it's like. But an interesting move from a producer really seen at being at that lower end of the market. And I say that in the most positive way. They've given people access at a great price to some really good wine for many, many years now. But a step into a slightly different direction for the Four Cousins, and one that I think a lot of people will watch with great curiosity. Now this is new, this is well established. If the last wine is brand new, this is anything but the La Motte Millennium. I remember buying this. This is one of the first bottles of wine I ever bought when I was in South Africa at university on a wine route back in 1998. I think I bought some 2005 Millennium and spent half of my university book fund on a case thereof because I A, thought I was enormously cool, but B, I'd done a bit of wine tasting beforehand. I certainly didn't regret it and I hung on to it. What I do regret is drinking all of it as soon as I did, because I think it would have done me in good stead if I'd kept it a little longer. Well, I got the chance to reinvest in some La Motte because the new Millennium is out. This is the 2020 and it has become a real go-to for many South Africans. It normally sits just north of the 100 rand a bottle price, so it's certainly not too expensive. Might be a little bit more now, and it's a wine that I think of all the reds that come out of the La Motte stable, this is the one people know the best. It's not in the same price bracket as something like the Pierre Neef, or certainly not the Hanley R. But if you want to get your hands on something that drinks well on a weeknight through the winter months, then this is a really good bet. A bottle, I think, is on its way to me this week. So as soon as I've got it, I'll have a taste and let you know what I think. Now, this was a really good weekend. This was the Sanlam Johannesburg Capital Seeking Champagne Festival. You remember a couple of weeks ago, we had a number of the producers on the show telling us about what they had in store. And I think the real excitement for this was the fact that we got a look at 4 young Black-owned South African bubbles brands who are adding a much-needed and very welcome dimension to the local market. So there were the established houses, the guys who've made a name for themselves around the world and will continue to fly that South African flag, people like Graham Beck and Lomoran, Benguela Cove and Steenberg. But then you had brands like a Yep Yep coming in who were there, the House of Amari, I think Amani were in there as well, Kulu. So young, cool, black South African brands. Quite a few of them playing around in that slightly sweeter, that off-dry and demi-sec space, which has very popular at the moment, especially amongst a younger market. It was a full event. It was a vibrant event. Daryl Robertson and her team delivering once again a really good weekend of bubbles and celebration. And I think this is Monday. I think there might actually be a couple of people still there. Such was the good time had by everybody. So another wonderful event. And well done to Darielle and her team for pulling that off this weekend. Right, so that is your news. Before we go in to our look at the Absa Cape Epic through the prism of wine, you're down to your last week for this month's very special offer and competition with Norman Goodfellows, where you just need to head over to the Dan Really Likes Wine pop-up store on Norman Goodfellows, or the general online store, or go into one of the 7 physical stores around South Africa. Buy any bottle of Dele Graf, although I challenge you to stick to just one. Buy any bottle or case or more, and you'll go into the draw. Next week, we are going to be announcing the winner of an incredible prize. What is that prize? Well, here's a look at what is up for grabs just until Thursday. In the month of March with Dan Really Likes Wine, Norman Goodfellows and Dele Graf, your chance to win the most luxurious stay imaginable. 2 nights at Dele Graf are yours. Opulent luxury, amazing views, some incredible wine, and 2 nights you'll never forget. Plus, if you don't live in the Cape, flights from Airlink to get you down here to enjoy your stay. How do you enter the competition? Simply buy any bottle of wine from Dele Graf at Norman Goodfellows in any of their 7 stores or online, or from the Dan Really Likes Wine digital pop-up channel. You'll go into that draw and one person is going to win 2 nights plus flights at Dele Graf. So you should really be sitting on your phone now while watching the show on your laptop or tablet or TV on YouTube and ordering some wine online. Currently on the store, on the Dan Really Likes Wine online store, you've got some Botmuskop, which I think is just a really good value premium red brand from South Africa. But you've got a number of options and that great prize. Bring it on, the chance to go down to Dele Graf. In fact, I think my guests might be surreptitiously entering, even though they all work for other wine brands. Such is the quality of prize. Let's meet our guests for this evening. One of them oversaw the prologue, the Absa Cape Epic. One of them is still repairing roots from having been a race village. And the third is the official wine producer of the Absa Cape Epic. So a very warm welcome to Samuel Viljoen, who is winemaker out at Nederburg and cellar master and general producer of incredibly cool wine in large volumes. Wade Roger-Lund, who looks after Meerendal, and Hannes Nell, who is looking, Hannes, remarkably composed because I was at Lourensford on Saturday. You no longer had a wine farm, Hannes. You had a mud factory. It basically looked like Wales in winter. It was ghastly. How are things looking this morning? How has the Lourensford team recovered from a brutal Friday and Saturday at the estate?
Dan, yeah, lovely to be on the show. It was absolute carnage on Lourensford on Saturday. We expected 15 millimeters of rain and it bucketed down. I think I measured 70 millimeters in the evening at my house and probably 100 plus in the mountain. So the tracks actually for the back riders became unrideable on Saturday, but and I saw people still finishing it was almost dark and some of them still finished. But we are recovering from the mud bath on this weekend. But that's the epic, and that's the whole Untamed Africa story, and that's why we have the epic here.
And you'll know this more than most, Hannes, because you are a very accomplished mountain biker yourself. In fact, when I was down last week, you were giving riders guidance and tearing around the estate on your bike. It's become a really important part of Lourensford, as it has a number of other wine estates in South Africa, where those single tracks and those mountain bike areas are now a key part of the offering beyond just wine and restaurants and the more traditional aspects.
No, definitely. We have a mountain bike club on the estate, and which gives the riders exclusive privileges to ride on the estate. We have actually, if you measure all the roads, all the normal roads between the orchards and vineyards, and put it in one straight line, That's excluding all the single tracks on the farm. It's 1,000 kilometers. We have enough space. We've got 4,000 hectares. We've got enough space to build some of the most excellent tracks, I think, in the Western Cape. And that's why the Epic is held here. And yeah, it's our privilege to host them here on Lourensford.
I see Lisa Harlow's watching at the moment. She is busy in the country since she touched down. South African wine sales last week up 11%. Lisa saying, evening from sunny Paternoster, but the rain was awful at the weekend. I did think of all the bikers, as did those of us who were on the race and watching it flow through. It was a brutal one. A little easier, I think, down at Meerendal, Wade, where you had the riders kick off the prologue. There is a long history, led, of course, by Meerendal's owner, who's medically obsessed with mountain biking. You guys have also spent a lot of time creating mountain bike track and creating a Durbanville route with some of the other farms that is absolutely magnificent if you are a mountain biker. So very special to have the race back at Meerendal again this year.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the show. It's a big, always a big, nice thing to have on the farm. You know, like you said, Herman, the owner, he's mad about mountain bikes. I'm a bit mad about mountain bikes. I think everyone on the farm has got a little bit of mountain bike in their blood. And, you know, we've got a really cool, the club around the area, the Tygerberg Mountain Bike Club is massive. I think it's one of the biggest clubs in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's run by really passionate people that, you know, manage the tracks. Patrick Roberts does amazing things on the routes. And the guys, you can come and ride a world-class epic route. It's amazing. Anyone, any skill level, you know, we cater for everyone from absolute beginner to the best of the best in the world. It's really cool. It really is a nice whole sort of event around the Durbanville Valley.
And it's also one that brings in, over the course of the Epic, people from other parts of the world who get to come in and not just taste some wine, although I've seen the riders, and generally they do taste a fair bit of it, but they get to experience this complete offering that Meerendal has. And I think you couple that with the fact that you've got the world watching the race on cameras via Supersport all over the planet, and you've got a really unique opportunity to showcase not just what South Africa is, but to give people a really good idea of why Meerendal is somewhere you should come and hang out.
Yeah, so a big driving factor behind Meerendal is South Africans love outdoor life. I think in general, a lot of people love outdoor life. So that's where we focus on. You know, we've got the restaurants on the farm, we've got the hiking trails, the walking trails, the mountain bike trails, all the big events that we do. We try to include the whole family, and then the nice thing is to show the hospitality of the Cape. I'm very proud of all the guys and ladies on the farm. You know, they don't know these people that's bike mad for 3 days, 4 days on the farm, but they smile and they wave and they say hi to everyone, and you know they bring a nice part of the South African vibe to the world, and it's awesome that also we get to showcase this to the world. You know, we got to put on our best look, and it's really cool, yeah.
And we also put on some of our best wine. We'll come back to you on that in a moment. Let's jump over to the person responsible, together with his substantial team, for producing the wine that was the official supplier, once again, of the Absa Cape Epic. Samuel Nederburg's name is very prominent whenever you talk about South African wine, and you've been involved over the years with all manner of different spaces and a sponsorship and partnership front. Why the Absa Cape Epic? Why do you think this is one that really works for you guys?
Hi Dan, thanks for having me. I think if you think about the mountain bike racing and racing, there's a lot of the aspects that are similar to winemaking, in terms of that you also need to, you know, have to do all the effort, and there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that the people won't see. But on the race day, you have to put your most effort in there, and you have supporting staff. Like in the winery, you also have supporting staff in the background. So there's a lot of similarities between winemaking and actually riding a bike. And you have to deal with conditions that what nature throws at you, and then that's the same for us in winemaking. You have to deal with conditions that are given to you, and take and make the best of it. So we are proud to be able to sponsor events like this. And actually tonight I've got the Motorcycle Marvel in my glass, and I think maybe on the last couple of days, some of the riders might have wished they were on motorcycles and not on a bicycle.
I think that's a very, very accurate summary of where they were. And I think those motorbikes would have struggled, though. Gee, it was a tough space. But it wasn't just a tough space, Samuel, for the cyclists. Yes, they had to battle through this harvest. And I spent a lot of time on the route this year, dropping in on winemakers, speaking to the different cellar masters, getting a sense. And there's always the case, because winemakers generally are fairly positive and upbeat lot, or at worst, very stoic lot, kind of, we'll make the best of it, we'll get through. But this has been a difficult harvest. The rain has wreaked havoc, and it has not made life easy for you.
Yeah, no, it's especially in the last couple of weeks. You mentioned in this race, this last week was also a wait. We also anticipating to finish, but still waiting for some cabs to ripen, and obviously we make the noble late harvest, so we're hoping that ripens fully. Some of the conditions are actually very good for development of noble late harvest, so for some varietals it works and for others it doesn't. Another challenge of course for us as winemakers were the load shedding, with the lack of electricity. Then planning in the cellar needs to be very, very well done. If you don't have electricity, you don't have cooling. And that is utmost important in harvest, to manage all the fermentation processes. And if you think about the producers themselves, just irrigation systems, you are scheduled on irrigation, and if you don't have power, obviously pumps don't go on, so that influence the moisture that you have in your soil. So it was challenging, not just for us as winemakers, for producers also there, but like you said, we always manage to make the best of our situation, so we'll continue.
You mentioned the power. I think there's another similarity there with the riders you'll see sometimes as you're watching the footage on Supersport, and one of the riders just suddenly, it almost looks like they've had a puncture rather than their tires. They're just deflated. They've lost power. They haven't got it anymore. And it happens even to the pros. You lose power in a slightly more conventional sense in South Africa. It's one thing if you're a little boutique vineyard and you've got a generator outside, you can toss some diesel in. It's still going to cost you some money, but you can kind of work out how it might just be manageable. You are a massive producer. What is the solution, if there is one, been to dealing with that power crisis this harvest?
Well, for us, we did have our generator capacity, but the thing is, you don't have enough capacity also to run everything. So it was like the Apollo 13 film, you need to have so much electricity to run a light bulb, and that's the same. You have to run a bottling line, you have to continue pressing, and you have to do grape intakes. So it is logistically, you have to manage it and take it almost stage by stage at some point. But if you don't have generation capacity, or like us have solar to help us, then it's tough. I can understand that some producers that really would have struggled.
Given the volume of wine you make, Samuel, you say you can't have everything at the same time, which makes perfect sense. Is that going to have a material impact on Nederburg's output for the 2023 vintage?
Luckily, Dan, in managing the electricity like we did, we could run the main things. You have to prioritize. You have to think cooling. Obviously, that's utmost important, and you can not offload everything at once, but at least you continue with offloading. And you have to also look at the bottling line. Every time you stand on a bottling line, then you need to look at your sterility. So managing that. So I think we, in terms of quality, keeping the fermentation under control really showed. I mean, the quality of the grape flavors we're tasting in the cellar on the white and red is really, really good this year. We spoke about conditions, but the cool evenings we had actually helped a lot of the keeping the acidity and keeping those fresh flavors. So in terms of what to expect of the 2023 vintage, I'm very positive actually. What we've tasted, the flavors that we have, the color and reds. This year is going to be, I'm going to think this one is going to be one for the books, and put all the struggles we had into the blender.
All right. It's every time you speak to a winemaker, you guys are always so good at getting the best out of any situation. You're remarkably positive people. Let's see if that extends to Hannes at Lourensford. Tell me about your harvest, about this vintage, Hannes. Rain bucketing down, mud all over the place. What impact has it had on you this year?
I think the biggest impact is our own mental impact. Like Samuel said, it's been a challenge, probably one of my toughest harvests, because you cannot call. It was like this weekend's Epic. We expect 50 millimeters of rain, and then 50 millimeters pour down. So, and that was the challenge, to bring in the blocks at the right time, and make the right decisions at the right time. I mean, we had instances where the Chardonnay, my top Chardonnay block, was not ready for harvest yet, and I needed to wait a little bit longer, watching the weather. We expected a few millimeters of rain over the weekend, and it poured down. And that's the story of this harvest. It was so unpredictable. You cannot really call it. During harvest, we become weather forecasters, and we have to look at everything, including the load shedding as well. So it's been a challenge, but we're happy with the outcome. We made the right calls at the right time. We could bring in the right blocks. Some had to hang a little bit longer to get the right sugar levels, and some we brought in a little bit earlier. There were some excellent calls. We decided to bring in our last Cabernet block, expected a few millimeters of rain again. And I said, well, I'm not taking the chance. I'm bringing it in, and it poured down again. And had I waited, we probably would have lost the block. So that's the story of this vintage. Nothing straightforward, but we're used to that. We're becoming used to load shedding as well, managing in the cellars, load shedding ourselves, deciding what equipment can run, what cannot run, and when we can do what to make a success out of it. But we're happy with the quality. Time will tell, but it will be a harvest for the books, I think.
You talk about deciding to bring in the cab. I was chatting to one of your fellow Hannesses, Mr. Storm, out in the Himalaya last week, and he was talking about his Pinot Noir. He bought half of it in, and he was going to leave the rest till the next day, and then something just said to him, no, finish it off. And lucky he did, because I think they got 60 mils of rain that night. Now, yes, there are tools today you can use. You've got satellite imagery. You've got all sorts of technological help. But it seems to me there's still a fairly large chunk of winemaker instinct where that little voice in the back of your head says, Hannes, now is the time. Was that the case with the cab? And how much of a role does that knowledge, that understanding, especially for someone like you, Hannes, who's been 2 decades and more at Lourensford, prepare you to be able to make that call at the right time?
Yeah, definitely instinct, experience as well. It's been my 21st harvest year. So by now we know Lourensford is like a washing machine. We've seen it again this weekend with the Epic. So we can always expect the unexpected with weather conditions. And this time of the year, the weatherman gets it wrong many times. And we've got to plan around it and make the right call at the right time. And that's sometimes not so easy. I remember a few years ago, 2019 was similar vintage like this. I went to a block like 3 times a day and decide, are we going to wait another day? Are we going to harvest? I ended up putting a rain meter up in the block and said, well, I'm going to take it through the weekend, and it rained 30 millimeters of rain. So sometimes we make the right call, and sometimes we have to wait a little bit, and then things can go wrong as well. Similar with the Epic. I mean, we've seen it Saturday with the 2 top teams losing their yellow jerseys because of technicals, and in the end losing the race, or not losing the race, but they didn't win the overall prize because unexpected technical difficulties on the race days. So that's so much similarities with what we experience with, again, taking it back to load shedding and the weather as well, that 1 minute you plan for stage 1 and the next moment stage 6 is announced. So yeah, we've got to plan around that and work around that, and that's the beauty of winemaking. It's not just pressing grapes and getting a bottle of wine out on the other side. A lot goes into it, not only during harvest, but for the rest of the year as well.
Hannes says that's the beauty of winemaking. I think those outside the winemaking world would suggest that's the terror of winemaking, but this is why these guys are as good as they are at what they do. Wade, what about you over in Durbanville? Slightly different area to Hannes. What has the harvest been like for Meerendal, and what is it going to deliver?
Yeah, it was also quite an interesting growing season in general. A lot of wind. I still believe that the wind is produced at Meerendal. The southeaster starts here as well. But very dry winter, actually, surprisingly dry winter. And then November, December threw in some interesting rainfalls as well. But the weather in the early parts of harvest was amazing. I mean, it was 28, 29 degrees Celsius in the day and dropping to around 15 at night. So really it was optimal ripening conditions, and it showed in the Sauvignon Blancs in our Pinotage Rosé and the old Bushvine Pinotage. They came in, they hit their marks and everything was happy. And then, sort of towards the back end of the harvest here, this early March, it's started getting that nip in the air already, and the rain started coming through and put quite a bit of pressure on the Shiraz, mainly on the Shiraz. Their skins are already quite fragile, and started putting pressure on them. And same with Hannes. Before that last big rain, I just decided, the last block of Shiraz, it needs to come off just to make sure that it's safe. But in general, it's actually been a really, really nice harvest. I think the small bunches and small berries have given some really nice concentration to the fruit. So overall, I think like Hannah says, the 2023 vintage is actually going to be really, really worth watching. Challenging, as winemakers. I think Hannes and Samuel and a lot of winemakers, we're all proactive people, so we don't sit still and wait for the weather to come. We actually have to keep an eye on it and watch it and then react to it properly. And I think that's what would have saved a lot of us this year, is that proactiveness. And yeah, so yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really good year from our side. On the Durbanville side, everyone, from speaking to the winemakers in the valley, everyone is pretty much happy with how it turned out. And yeah, so it's good.
Give us, for those people who don't really understand the mechanics of a harvest and the impact of weather, you may well be watching this and thinking, what's Dan going on about? What are these winemakers going on about? Grapes are waterproof. It's rain, it'll go away and it makes things grow. Surely this can't really be a problem. It obviously is. In very simple terms, Wade, why is rain coming down, particularly so close to your intended harvest time, problematic for you as a winemaker?
So the main thing is, obviously, as you get close to full ripeness and your picking date, the grape skins are almost at their weakest. You've got all this moisture that's built up inside the flesh, and it stretches the skins, and then you get 10, 15 mils of rain, and the grapevines obviously love this. They want some nice irrigation, nice water, and they pump all of that water to your skins, and then your skins get so stretched out that they burst. And then that leads to problems like sour rot, or yeah, it's not great. It's not fun.
And when things like that happen, Hannah spoke a little earlier about how to try and fix things when they haven't gone quite according to plan. You can't sort of get under the bonnet and change a few spark plugs and make sure the oil and the radiator are running. What kind of tools do you have as a winemaker to try and the post-harvest space to adjust and to make wine better if things haven't quite gone right, if you haven't quite got the picking time right, or the rain has just come down too heavily?
Yeah, so at that point, it pretty much comes down to our reactions as winemakers. If it's on the Shiraz, if you struggle with it like I did, then rather you ferment it on your get it off the skins a little. You take away that almost mushiness that will have a little bit of a negative impact on the wine. Play around with your cooling. That's the nice thing, is we've got really efficient cooling units nowadays, so you can play around with your temperature of your ferments. Maybe speed up the kinetics a little bit, slow it down a little bit. Get it. We're as modern winemakers, we are living in a very, very nice era where we've got the tools. We have the tools to make good wine. We've got the tools to counteract what Mother Nature throws at us. So it comes down to how you manage the tools that you've got.
And then also to combine the instinct and the experience that you have. Part of that comes from the space you work in. Hannes has been at Lourensford since they turned over a rock and found him there decades ago, and he's been going strong ever since. Wade, a little more recent addition to Meerendal, but certainly gaining very quickly an understanding of what works there. Samuel, what about experience from other parts of the winemaking journey? You've made wine in the Chateau Lafite of Oregon. You've been up in Rawsonville. You've been at Longridge. You've been at Klein Constantia. You've got so much experience from other places. How transferable is that knowledge and that understanding to now making wine at Nederburg? Do you regularly draw from some of those lessons that you've learned in other parts of the world as a winemaker?
Yeah, I believe your life is a university, so at each stage there's something to be learned. So in my vintage there in Oregon, there we could focus really on small lots. There was each barrel mattered. Each barrel was fermented on its own with its own yeast in some of the Chardonnay cases, and in the Pinot Noir we made there was in little lots. So at Nederburg, we also try with in our 1 ton fermenters, we also try to incorporate that type of attention to detail, especially if you think about the wines we make in terms of the 2 centuries and the private bins and the manor houses of those. In Rawsonville, in Gedini, it was a more bigger setup. We also crushed about 17,000, 18,000 tons, and most of it was, probably 70% of it at that stage was white. So there you learn a lot about efficiency, in terms of running a big cellar, how to manage tons on a day, get it through, get it technically right, get the analysis and everything, that you don't miss tanks, because that can obviously happen. So you need to make sure that your systems are in place. The vineyards with Klein Constantia, where I worked in as a student, it's something else to be working with the workers in the vineyards, pruning, taking out weeds, control with the shovel, listen to their stories. There's a lot of great stories to be told, especially on a Monday. So yeah, all of those things shape you, and it's knowledge that you gain and you can use again in your winemaking experiences.
You mentioned the operation out in Gedini and in Rawsonville, and that's a huge amount of wine to make. How did that help you to prepare for this role, which is one I get slightly dizzy just thinking about what you might have to do, Samuel, because the sheer volume of wine that you produce, the different varietals, the different labels across the board, you've got so much to keep an eye on. And when it comes to harvest, what's coming in from where, what are we making, what are we doing? I'd get mad in days. Did that help you to get there? And now that you're there at Nederburg, how on earth do you keep a handle on all of this?
Like I said, you learn to manage tons and keep calm, keep focused in each day. You just make sure that
2 weeks ago, I gave a friend of mine as a blind taste a bottle of wine to try. They had a glass, raved about it, thought it was one of the best ones they'd had this year, asked me what it was. A 2015 Nederburg 2 Centuries Cabernet Sauvignon. They were blown away by the quality of it. There's that level of wine you produce that is as good as it gets in South Africa. You then make wine on a slightly more prolific scale, and I look at the Baron. I think every 15 seconds, somebody in the world is opening a bottle of Nederburg Baron. In terms of your approach to these different segments, is it, right, I need wine for the Baron, let me look for it, or here's some wine, I think this will go to Baron or to 2 Centuries or somewhere else? What comes first, I guess? Is it the wine and find some grapes for it, or is it the grapes and we're going to put them somewhere?
You need to know where it's going to end up. So, like I said, the grapes, this is going to for Baron. And during the process, when you taste the type of yeast you use, the type of oak you use, everything is to keeping it in mind where it's going to end up. Like if you know it's going to be Baron, there's a certain taste profile that we know that works for Baron. So then you manage your tannins, your oak, and all of that to end up in that profile that works. So even Baron, which is a big blend, we do trials and make sure that the oak and the wine match. Oak is in winemaking, as it also plays a huge role. If you have the incorrect oak with the wine, you can sometimes enhance flavors that you don't like vegetative flavors. But if you have used the correct oak, then you can actually take that same tank and make it quite pleasant. So, you need to trust your taste buds and your intuition, but also know where it needs to end up. So even making in 2 Centuries and those type of wines which now go into barrel, the role of the barrel is also very important to understand in what sites, what barrels work with that site. Because sometimes, if you get wine from, let's say, Paul, like in the case of R163, the private bin, and you look at some of the grapes you get from other regions, the same barrel won't work with the same place or the same site. So that then boils down to understanding what barrel will work with that wine. So like you mentioned, Baron, bigger blend, and the 2 Centuries, which sometimes only boils down to about 4 or 8 barrels. So it's a huge scope to be able to work with, but it's a good challenge to have.
You mentioned the R163. I'm very glad you did, Samuel, because it allows me to link back to the Absa Cape Epic and 4 champions. Vera Lusa from Namibia, Kim LaCourte from Mauritius, winning the CM.com women's category, and then Matt Beers for the 2nd time, and Christopher Blevins, the American rider, joining his South African teammate in winning the men's competition at the Absa Cape Epic. So 4 world-class mountain bikers. Ties rather nicely, Samuel, to 4 world-class South African winemakers, because you, along with 3 of your compatriots, I think it was only a week or 2 ago, named in the top 100 winemakers of the year. And before you go into full winemaker humility mode, which is the standard set for all winemakers, well, you start telling me team, and they were wonderful, and you send all of the applause everywhere else. Take it for a moment, because this is for you, Samuel. This is an accolade where the rest of the world has seen what you've done, not just this year and not just this 163, but over the years. And this says the world knows Samuel Viljoen is bloody good at what he does.
Well, thanks for that, Dan. But yeah, like I said, without a good team, you can't get those results. You know, the guy in the barrel room needs to look after barrels, otherwise 29 months of maturation comes to nothing. You know? So, yeah, but thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that.
It is so difficult to get a winemaker to appreciate some credit, and that's a wonderful attribute that you all have. But congratulations and well done on getting that. Before we wrap up, the Epic done yesterday, so it gives the riders a chance to recover. What about the period going forward now, Wade, for those of you who are winemakers? Is it just right? The wine's in barrel, it's off to the Maldives for 6 months, feet up, and enjoy the holiday of being a winemaker.
Oh, geez, I wish someone needs to tell me that story. No, we started this morning with the blends. You know, the new Sauvignon Blancs and the new Rosés need to start getting ready for bottle. So, you know, this thing of a winemaker only working for 6 weeks of a year is no longer true. Now a winemaker's got to be everything. You got to go market the wine. You got to go sell the wine. You got to go do everything for the wine. So yeah, we start with bottling, and then we put our neat shirts on and our name badges, and we go sell some wine. So maybe the Maldives will be maybe in 20 or 30 years' time when I retire. We'll see.
Well, we'll have a quiet word to Herman. Tell him he needs a pop-up store on the islands. Put you on the spot here, Wade. 2023 vintage in a few years' time, when whatever it is arrives on the shelves of Norman Goodfellows, and I want to do a bit of shopping. What do you think for Meerendal? What's the varietal that's really going to stand out from this vintage?
Most definitely the Pinotage. You know, the heritage block. It's a 68-year-old block of vineyards, and I've sort of taken a little bit of paying some homage to Kwesi Stark, one of the original owners of Meerendal, the way he did some stuff. So it's definitely going to be one to look out for in the next few years.
Well, I can tell you the night before I left and set off for the Absa Cape Epic, I opened a bottle of the 2005 Pinotage from that heritage block, and it was deceptively fresh, still full of life, and a quite glorious wine. So 2023's got some big wines to live up to, but I'm glad that is one that we have in our sight. What about Team Lourensford? Hannes, normally this is when you start discovering clay pots from Belgium, and you've found a new kind of barrel that just started making in Vietnam, and you start playing around with all sorts of stuff because you've got that streak of madness to you, which I love, and it gives us some really fun wine that you've dug up. What are you going to be doing over the next few weeks? What's the process for winemakers now that everything's come in, the pressing's been done? What is the next stage of what you do?
Well, we're still actually busy pressing as I'm speaking and finishing off the intake for the day. But in the weeks and months to come, it's just nurturing the wines, getting them all off the skins, getting them in the right vessels, making sure the red wines go safely through malolactic. And then once we pack them away and age them, then, like Wade said, we have to get into the market and sell some wine as well. Otherwise, we're out of business. But we are playing around with some interesting projects. So I'm again busy with my clay pot wines. And there's some interesting things. So I'm particularly looking forward to the Petit Giraud from this year, which will come out only in a few years' time, but it's looking very promising. We added an addition to the range, so we're adding a Chenin Blanc this year that I played around with from a 34-year-old bushvine block. So some exciting things to look forward to.
And is there, I know there is, I'm not sure whether you'll tell me or not, something from that mystery cupboard that you've got up your sleeve for 2023?
2023 was a difficult year. We just tried to survive. But as you said, I'm always playing around with new techniques and with new stuff, and I've got to keep on being creative. So you'll have to wait and see. Come and visit, and I'll show you the secrets in the cupboard.
All right, like it doesn't take much to get me down to Lourensford, but there is an added reason. What about the team at Nederburg? How many people do you have working under your command, Samuel? And what does the next little stretch look like for you and your team?
Well, Dan, in peak, we have about 88 people, all putting their hands up and making sure that the grapes come in and process are to go well. Let's see, we're heading now. We're still waiting for the noble to come in, so the white wine won't finish before the red wine this year. So we'll wait for those nice sticky stuff to come in and turn into liquid gold. On the red, finishing up this week, hopefully with intake, pressing, maybe 2 weeks, and then we're done, hopefully before Easter weekend. So those ladies and guys can get a nice rest. And then, like Hannes said, the mallows, make sure that the red wine goes through mallows, and on white, the early ones, Sauvignons, and those start blending for vintage change, which is hopefully some of the first that's going to be in May, so that people can taste these nice and fresh 2023 wines. And then also some interesting things in the cellar, red wine scene playing around with the submerged cups and whole bunches. And Peter on the white with a few old vine Shannons, and we'll see how they all play out.
I'm not sure I'm going to get an answer out of you here because you're a wonderful diplomat, but I'll try nonetheless. Something that you might put your hand up and say, yep, from 2023, I think this wine, this varietal, this blend, this is going to be the one that's really going to shine through.
I would say if I look at the white, and I think it might be something that is actually going to show throughout the South African wine industry, is the Sauvignons this year is something else. The taste, the tropical fruit, and from really expression from different regions. So I think Sauvignon Blanc, Winemaster Sauvignon Blanc, that's going to be something to look forward to. And also that old vine Shannons, it's what we have in the barrel now developing is quite nice. On the red, this last week we tasted a Pinotage, which was almost a tropical fruit. So like I said, the red, the flavors this year's during fermentation is really actually tremendous. So and the lower sugars that we've had means also lower alcohol, but a bit of a softer tannin. So Cap, those 2 centuries blocks that we try to look after. But the tubs are looking quite nice, the tannins that we have. So that's investment for the next 2 years. So let's see in 2 years' time how they come up and have them in the bottle. And then we can say if I've spoke the truth.
I hope you are taking notes if you're watching the show, so you know what to be buying. I must tell you before I say goodbye to all of you, and to you in particular, there, Samuel, opened a bottle of the 2012 Ealdroot about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. The Epic. It had gone the color of slightly weak coffee. I look at it, oh, geez, it's going to be all right. It was magnificent. And I gave it some sweet wine lovers who were utterly enthralled with it. So keep making some beautiful wine there. It's a real figurehead in South African sweet wine. Guys, thank you. It's been a great, not just being able to celebrate the Epic and the roles that you all have in it. Samuel as the official wine, Wade this year as the prologue host, and Hannes as the provider of 81% of the mud used on the Absa Cape Epic for this year, but also the chance to get a bit of an insight into harvest, because I think it's a space where we can all learn so much about it, and realize that you guys, as much as you play it down, have got one hell of a job with your teams during that time of year. I know it's been a tricky one, but it sounds like we're still going to get some great wine out of it. So thank you for pointing us in the right direction for what to look out for, but also for joining me on the show and for supporting the Absa Cape Epic, which has been great to see. So good luck with the last of the pressing where it remains and putting everything together. And I know it might not be 6 weeks, 6 months in the Maldives, but I know generally you guys do get a little bit of a break, and it's a well-deserved one. So enjoy it, and we look forward to having you all back on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Dan. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Dan.
Wade Roger-Lund from Meerendal, and Samuel Viljoen from Nederburg, and Hannes L from Lourensford. And a big thank you to all of them. I see, I'm not sure who this is, somebody called Football Soccer. I'm not sure if that is a real name or not. But either way, watching from Meerendal Wine Estate, all teams are behind you, Wade. So I think that's probably some of Wade's colleagues cheering him on as we come to the end of the show. And the end it is. What do we have to look forward to on Thursday? Well, on Thursday, we're going to be having a look at Provine and how things went in Germany for the South African wine industry. Amongst our guests, we will be chatting very excitedly to Tim Hutchinson, the chair of DGB, who for the second year running received the trophy for Best South African Producer on Show in Germany. Tim will be giving us his thoughts on how Provine went. We'll also have some guests from Woiser, and we'll be chatting to Emile Joubert, the enfant terrible of the wine journalism industry in South Africa, giving us his thoughts, which I think will mostly revolve around eating large amounts of German food, if his Instagram account is anything to go by. Thank you for joining us this evening. And don't forget, we have that Telegraph competition closing on Thursday. It is the end of the week. Your last chance to win a luxury stay for two at Telegraph. Head over to one of the Norman Goodfellow stores, to ngf.coza, or to the Dan Really Likes Wine pop-up store. Get yourself some Telegraph and get into the running to win a very special prize. That's it for Monday. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks to our guests. And again, if you are watching, you did ride the Epic. Congratulations on getting through one of the toughest years ever. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. We'll see you Thursday. Goodbye.